We're live, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome again to the Kingdoms podcast. And today I have with me a mixed martial arts fighter fighting out of Niagara Falls, Ontario, Canada. Please big welcome, Aon Jeffrey. How are you, Aon?
Good man, how are you?
I'm good, brother. London, England. The weather is quite, it's good. It's good today. You
Huh?
know, it's not hot, it's not cold. It's just somewhere in the middle. So we're
Some
having
sunshine there?
Yes, we've got some sunshine as well. We're
It's
having
good.
that autumn weather. But how's it over there in Canada?
It's perfect, man. Like you said, same as there. Not too hot, not too cold. The sun is out. It's beautiful.
That autumn feel. And of course, congratulations on your win over the Phenom, Diego Lima. Wow. Come on, talk to us about that fight. How was it?
Good, man. Yeah, it's a big name on the record. He's a legend. Good to get back in the win column. Work my way back up to the top, so I'm very happy with it.
Oh, wow, fantastic. I was telling somebody yesterday that I see you fighting for a world title pretty soon. It's just in the horizon. But then, before we talk about the future, let's talk about the past. The podcast basically is about sharing the stories of extraordinary people and dissecting hot topics. You are an extraordinary person, extraordinary human being, and that's why I have that interest in speaking with you. Your story, your journey inspires people across the world, right? But then it did start with your childhood. Like, what was childhood like for a person like you? How was the whole growing up process like?
Honestly, man, I think it was pretty normal. I come from a good family. Like I didn't have any struggles growing up. My parents were good to me. They provided well. Uh, My dad passed away when I was 13, so I had a single mother for a while, but she worked very hard. She provided for us. Uh, she did everything she could to make our lives good. I have an older brother and a younger sister. We all went to university, and I'm very privileged and blessed with the life that I had.
Oh, wow, interested. For you, like, who were those early life influences, the early life mentors that you had?
Like I said, my mother, she was a single mom for a while, provided for three of us kids. I saw her work very hard my whole life to give us what we wanted and what we needed. So it's definitely an influence on me. My older brother too. He was like the older male figure for most of my life. So I looked up to him a lot.
See, the man of the house.
Exactly.
Interesting. So, the thing is this, a lot of fighters tend to have some sort of, would I say, childhood difficulties, right, in the build up to, fighting, you know, but for you, pretty much, normal life, right? But then there definitely would have been something that inspired you to get into fighting. What was that thing that inspired you to get into fighting?
It was just watching the sport growing up, man. UFC was starting to get popular. Like I said, I had an older brother. I looked up to him. Be watching UFC events with his buddies. I would tag along and watch. Got interested and started training and kind of took it from there.
UFC events. So talking about UFC in Canada, GSP was quite popular, during his heydays. Who were
Yeah.
those guys that you watched that, brought you into the sports?
Definitely watched a lot of GSP, but he was not my favorite, which is weird being a Canadian.
Yeah,
When
that's weird.
when he fought BJ Penn, I was always cheering for BJ Penn. I don't know why. I liked BJ a lot.
Eh,
I liked Anderson Silva a lot. They're probably my two main guys, BJ Penn and Anderson Silva.
Okay, so I always like to ask everybody into MMA about who their goats are, the top five. So if you were to put a top five, MMA list, everybody likes to talk about the Mount Rushmore. That's the top four. But do you have a top five?
Question. Probably put Anderson Silva at the top. I think he's the best. John Jones has got to be up there. GSP is up there. Probably Habib.
Oh, Habib
Who
number four.
else? Yeah, I think so. And who else should I put up there? Probably like missing somebody obvious here. You know, Amanda Nunes is probably the greatest female of all time to do it.
Okay, Amanda Nunes. Yeah, greatest. How about Ronda Rousey? What would you say?
I will say she is like the Conor McGregor of females MMA. I don't think that she was the most skilled fighter, but she like put it on the map, popularized it.
Oh yeah, so yeah, for me as well. Anytime I try to create my own list, right, of greatest of all times, I try to balance sporting accomplishment with bringing awareness to the sport.
Mhm.
I started watching MMA like not to would I say recently. Conor McGregor brought me into the sport like around 2018. Ronda Rousey made me know about the sport, right? So pretty much Ronda Rousey, Conor McGregor era was where I got into MMA. For me, my greatest of all time, I would say, John Jones, put in Demetrius Johnson because, he had that really great sporting accomplishment, even though he wasn't
Mhm.
like very commercially viable. I put in, Ronda Rousey because of what she did for, the sport. And I'll probably say Anderson Silva and Conor McGregor. Yes, hate him or love him, he became a two-time champion, two-division champion. And one of the four to ever do it. So I feel like, yeah, combining his accomplishment in the sport and the awareness he brought, of the sport to the world, I think he deserves to be in that, top competition.
He made the sport what it is today for sure.
Yes, exactly. So I think for a lot of us in the MMA space, we tend to focus more on the sporting accomplishment alone.
I agree.
Yeah, you think so, right? So, but in terms of focusing on sporting accomplishment alone, I find it difficult to justify the inclusion of Habib Nurmagomedov. Yeah, no disrespect to him, 29 and 0, breezing through, the opponents. He was very dominant. I think the dominance is, the main reason why a lot of people rate him very highly. But would you put him ahead of people like Demetrius Johnson?
Good question. Habib didn't have the toughest opponents, but like you just said, he was so dominant. Like
Yeah, it
he
was so
smoked
dominant.
everyone he fought. The thing I would say with Demetrius is that maybe at the time 125 wasn't a super deep division. 155 is like the best in the world. A lot of people consider it the deepest division. Like there's so much talent. Maybe 125 at the time wasn't. That's why I wouldn't include Demetrius there. But obviously, phenomenal champion too.
Definitely. And you know something that really impresses me about Demetrius? He proved himself across the world. He left the UFC, went to one championship, and he was still dominating guys there. So
Eh,
what would you say?
he just
Like,
retired, right?
yeah, he just retired.
Yeah,
Yeah, he just
for him.
retired. So it's really hard to deny him that space in the top, in the top echelon of the sport. But coming back to you, at what point did you start training MMA, and what background did you have?
You guys started. I was maybe like 14 or 15. Just like jujitsu and like basically cardio kickboxing. Like I had no intentions of ever competing. I'm from a small town. It was just a shitty little gym, just kind of something to do for fun, stay in shape, whatever.
Wow, wow, and then you just transitioned into like full time because a lot of people have like a wrestling base, right? A wrestling background. Some people have a striking background, and then get to put it up together. But you started, I think, from more like a striking background. So at what point did you put it
Even
together?
man, I would say I started mostly in MMA. Like if I had to say one thing that was like really my base, I guess I would say jujitsu because I was at this small gym. When I moved away to university, I started at a little bit of a bigger gym. There were some pro fighters, some amateur fighters. It was more of a jiu-jitsu gym. I started doing some jiu-jitsu
Okay.
competitions and stuff. So if I really had to say, I would say that was my base, even though I was always doing striking and grappling at the same time.
I see. That's why you are a really well-rounded, practitioner. And for every fighter, everybody in MMA, I tend to talk to, right, on the pod, I always put them on the spot regarding the top three disciplines that you think are required to make a well-rounded fighter. For me, I think it's wrestling, jiu-jitsu, and I'll say Muay Thai, kickboxing. But for you, what are the top three disciplines you think, would help make a well-rounded fighter?
Say wrestling, boxing, jiu-jitsu.
You'd favor boxing over kickboxing.
So
Justify it. Justify it. Yes. Yeah. I think another
um
person has said the same thing that you said, right? But the person
uh,
justified it in some way. But I wonder how you are going to justify it.
the hands are more important. I think if you look at like percentages of strikes thrown, I think the hands are way more important. Boxing teaches you work and head movement.
Yes. Yes.
They specialize in that stuff a lot more than Muay Thai or kickboxing.
Exactly what I was waiting to.
Then
The footwork is very, very
there's
important. And the
yeah, the
stance.
clinch and elbows and knees are super important too, I guess. But no, I think if you have a super strong wrestling base, you can neutralize clinch out of the ways of knees and elbows. Yeah, I think that boxing is the most important.
Interested. I think I would consider changing my stance on
Yeah.
on this issue because boxing is really, really important.
It's so hard to say though, right? It's mixed martial arts. Like everything is used, so the way one aspect of it is like impossible.
Wow, wow. Let's go back to the early days. Your early days in the sport. Like, at what point did you discover that this is what I really want to do for myself?
Question, man. I don't know if I ever really had that moment. I had to, if I had to pick a time though, I would say when I got my first offer for Contender Series, I realized maybe I can do this as a career.
The Contender Series. I remember you fought. Who did you fight in the contender? Because I remember seeing you on Dinner White Contender Series. At some point, you were with the Cage Series, right?
Cage Fury, yep.
Yes.
The guy that I fought on Contender Series, the first one, he just fought yesterday in UFC in the co-main event.
But cool main event.
It's Brendan Allen.
Brandon Island. Oh wow. He got destroyed by Imavov, but he did have a good start. I don't know what happened.
He had a good start, and then he kind of looked flat after. Sucks, man. Me and him are like pretty good friends now. I train with him a lot, so it was a little bit disappointing. I think he's better than what he showed yesterday.
Yeah, he's better than what he should. And of course, please tell him he made me lose money yesterday.
Yeah, you bet on him?
Yeah, I bet on him, and he made me lose money. And of course, I'm happy for the main event. Moicano.
Hmm?
I
Good,
did
man.
have my money on Saint Denis,
That's my
but I lost money in the main event. And that's really crazy. And Moicano was actually a very big underdog, and he came and he proved himself.
he looked very good, man.
But did you see him winning that fight?
I feel like Saint Denis, you don't know enough about him yet. He hasn't been around that long. He's had some really good performances. He's had not as good, so I feel like he's like proven still a little bit.
Yeah, and speaking of proven, I think that there was a lot of recency bias going into that fight, especially with that performance he put up against Dustin Poirier.
Mhm.
Yeah, I feel like he was just like very much hyped up, and
I agree.
yeah, he nearly put Poirier away. So with you challenging Poirier, who is elite level in the sport, right? People feel like, oh, he just had a bad night against Poirier, and Moicano proved otherwise. But I think he took too much damage in the first round, so it was difficult coming back. And yeah,
Saint Denis. Man,
essentially
that was rough. He
too
looked
much damage,
like he got hit by a truck after the first round.
and the doctor had to stop it.
Yeah, that was bad. His eyes swollen shut. You could tell he just wasn't the same guy after the first round.
Crazy, crazy. I remember you earlier in your career you fought Andrei Petrosky, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's in the UFC now. But who else did you fight in the Contender Series? Sachin.
Kyle Bahalo.
Yeah, Carvalho. That guy is a menace.
And he's very good.
That guy is extremely good. Like I feel like the middleweight, division right now is the talent pool that is a Shark Tank right now. Both, in the Bellator and in the UFC. Interestingly, I was at Bellator's event in London. Is that 2 weeks ago? Either 2 weeks or 3 weeks. Fabian was meant to fight. You fought Fabian before, right? Fabian Edwards was meant to fight this other guy, the current champion.
Yeah, Johnny
Eblin. Yeah, Johnny Eblin. But what happened? You guys just, changed the main event.
I think they just pushed it back to make a new event. I don't know if there was really a good reason for it.
That's not really nice because
Oh, it's not nice for the fans.
you guys sold the tickets with me believing I was going to come watch Fabian Edwards.
It's too bad.
Yeah, it's quite bad for the fans. And the funny thing is, the fight has actually been pushed to the Saudi card.
Like
So
2 weeks, I think.
yes, it's just making that card, very stacked. But I'm not able to make it to Saudi Arabia, so
Me neither.
but that card is really stacked, and of course you have Francis Ngannou versus
Crazy.
Ryan Ferreira. I don't know what's your prediction for that fight.
No, man, it's heavyweights. Heavyweights is crazy. Like it doesn't even matter who's more skilled, who's a better fighter. Everyone hits so hard that it's like one punch can end anyone's night. So like it's always a coin flip.
Yeah, there's a lot of randomness to the heavyweight variable because everyone has
like
plan.
that.
Yeah, it's two heavy hitters, right? Everyone has a plan until they get hit in the face.
Exactly. You get hit in the face by Ferreira or by Ngannou and your night's probably over.
It's night. But like speaking of the fights, right? At some point you get to discover. I feel like martial arts helps you to discover yourself more, right? Especially with the kind of adversities that you guys face. I have trained, but I have never fought professionally. I've never even fought in the amateurs, right? I always, try to avoid the competitive, combat. But for you, it takes, not just that physical strength, but the mental strength for you to be able to engage in this. But what fight would you say helped you to discover how tough you are mentally?
Good question. I never really thought about that. I've had few fights that were like pretty tough at the beginning. My very first fight ever, my first amateur fight, I got beat up very bad for 2 rounds, and I almost finished the guy in the third round. So, like straight out of the gate, that was a good one. Fight against Sean Brady was kind of similar. He won the first 2 rounds, and then I put it on him in the third, and I won the third round. So, I probably had a few moments like that.
And then prove to yourself that you can always come back from adversity.
Exactly.
Now, talking about the preparation process, right? It's a physical game, but also a mental game. So, like, how do you prepare for a fight?
I actually just started working with like a mental performance coach. My last fight was the first camp that I worked with him, and I think that was very helpful. An aspect I think that a lot of guys overlook. Everyone says what you just said. Everyone says this game is as much mental as it is physical, but then he does any work on the mental side of things,
On
right?
the mental
So
side.
yeah, so I worked with this coach, and that was enlightening. It was cool.
Wow. So now piecing it together, working on the mental side, working on the physical side, mental health, physical health, for me, I always believe when there's a handshake between both sides, you have a well-rounded human being, a properly functioning human being, because your physical health could be, peak performance. But when your mental health is not peak performance, you would mess things up, right?
Mhm.
On the side of the physical health, right, we need, diet and nutrition. So how do you take care of that?
Actually, a nutritionist on the side. I went to school. I studied medical sciences, and then I did a sports nutrition
Wow.
certification. Yeah, so
Wow, you're so blessed
yeah,
because you know
uh,
the right thing.
man. So that's like my other passion outside of fighting is nutrition. So like I've got that pretty dialed in.
So you make your own meals, or do you meal prep, like, and like the appropriate calories, the appropriate
Exactly,
proportions of carbs,
exactly, and
proteins, and
year round too. I think that's a thing that a lot of fighters do so well. Their diet's pretty good in camp, but then they have like a couple months outside of camp. They don't eat good, they get big, they gain too much weight, and then they get back into camp. And part of it is like trying to lose weight rather than just focusing on training and performing. Focused on losing weight because out of camp they're getting so big.
I see. Yeah, speaking of getting so big, there are a lot of weight bullies in the sport, and weight cutting you know, is really, really tough. But weight cutting, they say, is more of a science than an art. Some people are getting it right, but some others are not really getting it right. But for when it comes to weight cutting, like what's your own approach to weight cutting?
And I keep my weight in a pretty good range, like year round. I could probably fight on a week's notice, week of the year, not getting big in between. And then I kind of have the water cut down to a science, like you said. It's easy for me. I usually only end up sweating 5 pounds. So yeah, it's not a hard weight cut.
Wow, that's really good because it doesn't put a lot of strain on your body, because a lot of fighters, when they engage in massive weight cuts, like, it tends to even affect their performance, because you feel your body tanking. But have you ever in the past, like, been in any fight and you feel like your mind is sharp but your body is not as sharp as the mind?
I think so, man. No, I think I'm pretty much always like physical performance. Weight cuts are good, and I'm in shape year round, so I've never really had like a tough weight cut or felt shitty on fight night.
Because I did speak with somebody from the UFC, right? Damon Jackson. And recently, his last fight, you could see he was just, trying to use the grappling in the third round to survive.
I remember his fight. Yeah,
You, re-
yeah, it
you
was
know what?
rough.
Yeah, what he told me on the podcast was that he felt it himself that his body tanked in
Mm,
that fight, and he's moving from featherweight to lightweight.
mm, a good
Do-
idea.
But you being in middleweight, do you think you can go up to 205?
Probably not. I usually walk around at 205, so no, I would be so small, I think, for that weight class.
So you just stay at middleweight. How about if
Yeah, I think so.
let me put you on the spot. What if you told, okay, come fight for the welterweight title?
Probably make it. I don't think it would be fun.
Gonna be gruesome,
Gonna
but
be gruesome.
we're talking about the world title on the line.
If the payday's right, I can probably make 170.
Whoa, whoa! You just try to push it. Speaking of, there are quite some guys, who've fluctuated between middleweight and welterweight, and they just need to find the right balance of where they really, really uh are a killer at. Looking at someone like Douglas Lima, I believe Douglas Lima at some point did fight a welterweight. Who else? Even Robert Whittaker as well. Robert Whittaker did fight at welterweight before. Sean Strickland as well did fight at welterweight before he moved up to
I think
middleweight.
Drakus did too, the champ.
Yeah, Strickers. Yeah, he was a double champ, back in EFC back in South Africa. But looking at the middleweight landscape, what is happening, brother? What is happening? Like the middleweight used to dominated by, dominant champions, right from the days of Anderson Silva.
Mhm.
We had Bisping at some point, then GSP got the title
Mhm.
and led to the era of Whittaker. Whittaker was dominant for a while, then Adesanya came over and we had, since Pereira came in, right? We've been having the title changing hands.
Mhm.
Now we have Dricus, right? Taking it from Sean Strickland. Who do you think deserves that title shot, against Dricus next?
Probably Strickland. I think that's what they've told him. I think he's next in line. That's the fight they're going to make.
And the first fight was close. And I think for me, I was biased because I had my money on Dricus. So at the end of the fight, I was just shouting, yes, split decision, Dricus. And, the fight went the way of Dricus. But when you were watching that fight, who did you score that fight for?
Drakus won. He did.
Dana White, was saying he thought Sean Strickland won. But I like to be objective. If I did not place money on that fight, I probably would have been thinking maybe in another direction. But one thing is that fight was very, very close. So it's difficult to say, okay, this person won it clearly. But let's see what happens in the rematch. When it comes to the top guys now, you have Adesanya, right? In that, number 2 contender spot. So if you were to turn matchmaker, who would you put against Adesanya up next?
It's a good question. Paulo Costa's a fun fight again. Their first fight, he got beat up pretty bad, but I think that could be a rematch. Kerr's always a good fight too, and he's still right up there at the top. What else do we got there?
Imavov. Imavov is number 4.
Yeah, true. Yeah, I guess that would probably line him up for a shot if he could beat Izzy next. There's a lot of good matchups at middleweight.
And of course, at number 5, you have your boy, Kyle Brayo.
Mhm.
I think he's at number 5.
I think that's him and Izzy is a cool fight, probably.
Yeah, he's trying to call Easy out, but styles make fights. Like, how do you see their styles matching up against each other?
I think both very good strikers. I think that'd be a fun striking fight, but I think Kyle also knows how to wrestle and grapple. I think he's a jiu-jitsu black belt, so if he gets the fight to the ground, he can maybe finish him there.
Interesting. So I don't know what's next for Easy, because looking at the killers that are coming behind, it feels like Easy has a tough line of opponents, coming up for him.
Sure.
But for me, I think I would want to give him a favorable matchup. Easy is from my country. He's my countryman. So I always want the best. I always want the best for him. I think Imavov is a more favorable matchup. I don't know if you see it that way.
I agree. After last night, I don't think that was like a extremely impressive performance from Imavov, so it'd be a good fight for Izzy.
So the top 5 is stacked. And of course, yeah, you're doing well with Bellator, but I think I'd really love to see someone like you in the UFC as well. You should never say never. I should call Dana White and tell him, come on, come on, come on, bring this man into the UFC. But aside from MMA, right? Like, what passions do you chase outside of the sport?
I said I'm into nutrition. I went to school, studied that stuff. So that's like my number one thing outside of fighting, man. I have I do some clients, like a little nutrition consulting business. Worked in a clinic for a long time. I read a lot. I'm interested in that stuff.
Speaking of reading a lot, like do you read within the area of health, nutrition, or you read outside, probably reading about business, reading about philosophy? Like, what are your like general interests, basically?
Always like nonfiction, usually science stuff. Gotten into some philosophy stuff like Buddhism and stuff like that too. I like that stuff.
I caught you. I caught you. Because, looking at a person, you strike me as a cerebral fighter, right? You are not just intelligent when it comes to combat, right? You are intelligent when it comes to real life, right? And for me, I appreciate that as a well-rounded person. So, speaking of philosophies, right? Like you are a person who has proper structure to life, right? So, what would you say are those philosophies that you've been able to pick up, over the years that has actually helped contribute to your own success in life?
It's a big question. Like I said, I've been getting into the Buddhism stuff lately. Mindfulness is a good practice. It's like super popular now. There's tons of books about that, podcasts, whatever, mindfulness. But I think it's a good practice to kind of and like take in what's happening currently in your life, not dwelling on the past, not thinking too much about the future. You gotta in the moment and be there and live.
Mindfulness. So, what other philosophies would you add?
Oh, if this is like a philosophy, I think like being a good person is a big part of life. I don't think it matters how good of a fighter you were, how many championships you won. If you were like a shitty person and mean to everyone around you, you probably don't have too many friends or good relationships. So I think that's a very big part of life also.
Very, very big part of life. It's always good to be good to people, but a lot of people do not realize that. And I think we live in a world right now that is very individualistic. A lot of people are greedy. A lot of people just think about themselves. A lot of people think about what isn't it for them, what they can benefit, right? And especially, it's very, very myopic because they only see now, they only see today. They don't think about the future, right? They don't think about posterity, and it's not a very, very good way to live. People like yourself are usually principled, right? You live your life based on like certain principles, and you're able to advise, young and upcoming people. But what principles would you advise younger people to live by?
I would tell them just what I said to you as my last tool to live by is be a good person. I think that can get you further in life and being a good fighter, being a good businessman, whatever. If you good person to other people, I think that's important and it can get you further than a lot of other things.
Interesting. That's really good. And of course, I hope like our audience out there are getting this message and getting it right. When it comes to you, you're a fighter, you are a nutrition expert, but there are like certain skills, or competences that you have, but people don't really know about, right? So what would you say are those things that, you're skilled at and you are proud of personally, but people don't really know about?
I'd say probably my education. I think a lot of people don't know that I went to school, studied medical sciences, and like I'm constantly learning, reading books, articles, like studies. I think when people see an MMA fighter, they wouldn't assume that they're a very scholarly person, but is one area of life that I try and focus on.
Wow, that's actually very, very impressive. And speaking of like hot topics around MMA, people have been talking a lot about fighter pay. Jake Paul has come in on the whole issue, and then it has become quite a hot topic in MMA, right? A lot of casuals say, "Oh, the MMA guys are not getting the kind of pay that the boxing guys are getting," but boxing and MMA are two different sports, right? And I think in recent time, we've had, issues like the class lawsuit against the UFC because of, fighter pay. But like, what's your own, without putting yourself into any form of trouble, what is your own take on the whole fighter pay issue, especially comparing boxing with MMA?
You said it's a different sport, so it's hard to compare. I mean, hockey players also don't make what baseball players make, but nobody's complaining about that. So it's hard to compare the sports. No, man, I feel like nobody was forced into this. Like nobody forced you to be an MMA fighter. So if you don't like the pay, you can always do something else, right? I mean, you can get bucks or something. It's going to be an easier job, and maybe it's going to be a similar pay, and it's going to be a little bit more easy lifestyle to live. So I wish we were paid more for sure, man. I wish it was more fair, but it doesn't seem like it's going to change anytime soon. And again, I don't think anybody is forced into this as a career.
Interested. I think that's a good take on it. And one thing I noticed with boxing is, boxing is top heavy. A lot of the top guys like earn big money, but a lot of people tend to want to just take the information from the top guys, right?
Mm-hmm.
And try to extrapolate it on people, even in MMA, but it doesn't work that way. People who are just, beginners in boxing earn really, really ridiculously low pays and nobody's talking about it. But people are trying to, talk about MMA pay. But in combat sports, right, there was something that happened recently. And, at the Olympics, right, there was some misinformation going around about transgenders fighting in boxing. And then you've, like, in recent time had people talking about people who are trans, right, fighting in female combat sports. But what's your own take on the whole issue of a man, transitioning into a female and now fighting in, combat sports?
Like you said, there was a lot of misinformation. So I think that's a lot different than what happened in the Olympics because
Uh,
information that I have from the Olympics, it was not a man that transitioned into female sports. It was
yeah,
one who was born
a
female and
female.
raised as a
Yeah.
female and had some different genetic things going on. So I think it's a lot different comparing those two situations. I don't think we see too much of transitioning into sports. I know there's been a couple over the years, but I don't know, man. I'm happy that I am not the person that has to make those decisions on who is allowed to do what.
I was
My
telling you.
job.
I am telling you because it's a tough one. And, thankfully you are a science person, right? And you would understand, when it comes to the whole issue of chromosomes and XY chromosomes, XXY, XYY. So some people were saying that the lady, right, even though she's biologically female, that she had a higher than normal level of testosterone in her system. And that reminded me of the South African lady, Caster Semenya. She had a high level of testosterone, right? And she was told to take hormonal drugs, hormonal suppressants or something. So to suppress the level of testosterone in her system to an acceptable level. But it has raised a lot of uproar in recent time. Like, why would you tell somebody to suppress their testosterone level? But I don't have a very strong understanding of this from like a science perspective. Like, what does it do to your body, reducing, your level of testosterone? And in your own opinion, do you think that's acceptable, or it should not be, it should?
Again, man, I'm happy that I'm not the one who makes these decisions, but testosterone, it's a masculinizing hormone. It causes you to be stronger. You can put on muscle mass. Your bones can grow stronger, deepens your voice and stuff like that. Like it essentially makes you more of a male. So and like she was born that way. It wasn't
On
like
that
she
way.
was cheating or taking exogenous hormones or whatever. So I guess somebody has to make that decision if she's allowed to compete like that or not. It's not super black and white, I guess, right? It's a very key subject.
Very, very, very. And of course, talking about MMA, right? Looking at the future of the sport, a lot of people, you know, tended to have backgrounds in like different sports, boxing, wrestling, jiu-jitsu. Now we're seeing people now having background where they train MMA, going into MMA. Like, what do you think the future of the sport is? It's been very bright. It's been growing very fast from 1993. But the next 5 to 10 years, what do you see happening in the sport? Is there a possibility of, you know, MMA getting in on the Olympics? Like the global influence of MMA. Like, what do you see for the sport in the next, couple of years?
I don't think it's going to be in the Olympics anytime soon, but it's going to keep growing as a sport. There's like kids getting into it now at 4 years old. The talent level is going to keep rising. I think we're going to see like easy athletes, and I think the sport's just going to keep growing.
Wow. But for you, like, what's your plan after retirement from the sport? Like, how do you intend to give back to the society that has, given you a lot? You've accomplished a lot in the sport already. And of course, I am rooting for you to become a world champion very soon.
Bro.
So by the time you are out of the sport, like, what's the plan to, help the next generation of athletes?
I don't know if I'll ever like a full-time coach or anything like that. I'll for sure still train and help the younger guys in the gym and stuff, but I don't think I have a plan yet. I'm still doing this thing myself, so when it comes to an end, then I'll figure it out.
Okay, but then you are a big brother in the sport. So what's your advice to young up and coming athletes?
Hard, man. Don't be lazy. Don't be trying to take time off all the time. Train hard every day. There's no shortcuts. There's no magic. You got to be in the gym working.
Fantastic, fantastic one. So, and for you, what is next for AJ?
Man, I just fought a few weeks ago, so just waiting to hear what is next on the table for me.
Wow. And of course, start calling the big names out because we need a strap in Canada. We need a
Coming.
by God's grace, definitely that has to come back. So, at the end of the report, like we usually have a tradition wherein we ask a question from a previous guest, right? And of course, you would leave a question for the next guest. The question that the previous guest has left for you, it's quite deep. To give you context, he's a sports journalist, right? He is with Fox Sports Australia. He's also into MMA. He's one of those guys who interviewed Streetcars, Easy, and the likes. When we had UFC 305, and of course he's asking, what does life mean to you? Why are we here?
One.
Gotcha.
Think about this
Gotcha,
a
brother.
lot. Think about this a lot, actually. Think it's whatever it means to you and make it whatever you want, and you can focus on that. So I think it's a very individual thing. I had to say for myself what it's about. It's about doing something that makes you happy, chasing a passion that you're passionate about, and having good relationships.
Wow. I think you put it up nicely. You put it up nicely. And what question do you want to leave for the next person?
To go in the opposite direction, it's not going to be deep at all. Let's say,
He wants it to be shallow.
what is your favorite cheat meal?
What is your favorite cheat meal? Oh wow, that's quite easy. I wish I was the next guest, but I am the host to the next guest. So, before you leave, do you want to leave a shout out for anybody before you leave?
out to you, man. Thanks for having me on. That was a fun interview. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. Of course, attitude of gratitude is good attitude. Of course, I'm really grateful. They say if somebody shares their time with you, they share their lives with you. And of course, thank you for sharing your time and your
Hey,
life.
man.
And of course, thank you for being an inspiration, to the younger generation as well. You're highly, highly appreciated.